stand up when I speak. Gotta get that energy going. So first of all, I'm really glad to be here and speak at a Labor Council, Part Labor Council, a coalition event, because I really feel that we need to reinvent the labor movement in this country. We need to reinvent it in alliance with other social movements, and in particular in alliance with unemployed and unorganized workers and poor people. And I think the labor movement is moving in that direction. I'm really happy to see that and see it reflected in this room. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. And then I can't help it, but I'm trying these days not to be quite so bombastic when I speak and so on. But I just want to start by saying that these so-called reforms to the EI system that the Harper government has put forward, and that the NDP looks like they're going to prop up the Harper government to pass, suck. These reforms only help the people who have been long-term on EI. And that's a very small minority of working people, mostly older workers. So I want to step back for a second. I'm going to go to a global context, which is what my job is here, but I just want to step back for a second and say a couple of things about EI. One of the best things about Canada when I was a young person was that we had a decent unemployment insurance system. 80% of workers were covered by unemployment insurance. And when you left your job, it wasn't, full pay or anything, but we got 66% of our wages while we were looking for another job. It wasn't perfect, but you could live on it. You wouldn't be living in poverty. What's happened? And both liberals and conservatives have been responsible for this. In the last recession, in the 1980s, 85% of unemployed men and 81% of unemployed women could rely on benefits if they lost their job. Today, it's 45% of men and 39% of women. This has happened through a series of cuts that were put through without any real debate in this country. And on top of that, women are hit harder, as you already heard. There's a huge gender gap. Only 32% of unemployed women qualify for regular EI benefits in recent years compared to 40% of men. It's still low for men, but it's even lower for women. When the gap is even higher when it comes to average benefits. In 2006, 2007, the average benefit for women was $298 per week compared to $360 for men. And on average, women qualify for shorter periods. So women are getting hit harder by the cuts, and new Canadians. Those are the two groups, as well as young people, that are getting hit hardest by these cuts. So what I say, and I think what the Labour Council is saying, is it's not good enough to reform this or that part of so-called EI. I hate calling it EI. Unemployment insurance, that's what it is. Right. We paid into it, and we deserve to get it back when we're unemployed. And this isn't just happening here. This is happening all over the world. I'm an eternal optimist. When I was president of NAC, people used to call me the Johnny Appleseed of the women's movement. I always see the good side of things. So when we had this massive crisis of capitalism, I thought, it's like the Wizard of Oz. Finally, the curtain's been pulled away and everybody can see how rotten the financial system is, how rotten the value system is, where people who gamble with our money, and most of it is our money through pension funds and so on, people who gamble with our money to make out of greed are the ones who get valued most and paid most, and the people who work hard, building things, making and serving our food, taking care of our kids, get the short end of the stick. And finally, we're going to have to see how rotten the value system is in the society that we live in. And that started to happen a little bit. Unfortunately, it's these same greedy sons of bitches that run the newspapers and the television. So even though there was a moment there where this was visible to people, and people started to maybe have doubts about the myth that wealth is going to trickle down, they shut that down very quickly. And now they're doing what Naomi Klein says in her shock doctrine, which is using the crisis to try and restructure things even more to hurt the most vulnerable society. And that's what we have to change, and we can change it. Of that I'm convinced. Because all over the world, what's happening is people are realizing that we can't stay anymore on our particular issue. Unions can't just fight for unionized workers and forget about all the people who aren't in unions. Poor people have to find allies and are finding allies in other parts of the community. So, we're seeing a situation now where environmental groups are starting to unite with indigenous groups to defend the land and support indigenous groups and give them resources. We're seeing all over the world a convergence of issues where women realize, like, to fight for women's rights today, we have to fight against poverty, we have to fight against racism, we have to fight against, we have to fight for better social services. And all of these issues are starting to come together now. And we can't anymore look in a selfish way. If we want to change a society where selfishness and greed are the dominant values, then we have to ourselves turn that around and say, okay, who can we work with? Who can we support? Where is there solidarity? So in this town, for example, in the last year, we have seen the biggest mobilizations in Canadian history. And what were they? They were the Palestinian community, the Tamil community, the Iranian community. These people put us to shame in their knowledge of organizing. Well, let's get, some of them are in the room now, let's get more of them in the room to fight for better reality for the benefit of our community. We have a global crisis, and the only solution is global. And we're lucky here in Toronto because the whole globe's right here. The whole globe right here in this town. And if we stand up and say, no, you're not going to divide us, we're not going to turn on each other, we're not going to believe the lies you tell us about each other, we're going to work together, we're going to support those struggles of those communities who are fighting for the people back home, and if we do that, and we have been starting to do that, then they will be here with us, and as I see in this room, it's a great diverse room, and the power of that unity across all those differences between men and women, of all different levels of workers, if you want. Workers, what am I now? Okay. I'm just getting going, Okay. Of workers who, who are unionized, who have good paying jobs, who still have managed to hold on to those industrial jobs. Those workers uniting with people who are doing precarious work, working at 2 or 3 jobs at minimum wage. That kind of unity across those differences, uniting across those differences, will give us the energy we need and the power we need to change things. Because right now we don't have any political party arguing for what we want. We have to push them and we have to get radical. A little change here and there isn't going to do it. No. We want unemployment insurance to cover every worker who gets unemployed, everyone without exception. Not to do that is nothing better than stealing our money. That's right. And it has to stop. So I'm very excited to be here. I know you had a fabulous stewards meeting, and I just want to end by saying that in the States right now, people are really mobilizing around a slogan which I think is great, which is a real recovery, a week of action to demand a real recovery for working people. The recovery that's happening now is only a recovery for those gamblers over there on Bay Street.
Wall Street.
On what?
Wall Street.
And Wall Street, thank you. Bay Street and Wall Street. But since we're in Canada, I said Bay Street. Bay Street and Wall Street. And the mobilization in the States now, which is around petitions and mobilization, all kinds of mobilization. Some people don't want to go out in the streets, and that's cool. There's other ways they can participate in meetings like this, and through petitions. I noticed there's a petition on there. Let's get it online. Let's get it on Facebook, on Twitter, on all those kinds of social networks where young people are. Because young people have a big stake in this. This summer, unemployment among students was phenomenally high. And so they have a big stake in this. So I want to say we want to think outside the box in every way. We have tremendous potential. We have a lot of tools at our disposal. And if we figure out a way to work together, and I'm hoping some of that happens today. I know it's been happening over the last year. I went to a great educational that the where's I forgot the name? Labor Education Center did in the summer, where people could tell their stories, and I see we have a similar thing here. Telling our stories, telling the stories of hardship faced by people who don't have support, who the social safety net no longer exists for. That's how we're going to win the majority of people to our side. And we have the tools to tell those stories and spread them around. And I'm really excited to be here tonight and wish you best of luck in organizing this campaign, because I just know that it can make a huge difference, not only in Toronto, but in the whole country. Thank you.